We are told the table gives information about the weekly wages of 80 people. Okay, so we have this diagram here, table here, sorry. Part A has asked us to complete the cumulative frequency table, okay, for 1 mark. So to do this, very simple. All we do is we have our starting value, in this case, which is 5. And then to get to this next one, because it's a 200 to 300 class, we sum the 200 to 250 and 250 to 300. So 5 plus 10 is 15. 200 to 350, which is our next class. So this one, we are going to take our original and we're going to add the 20 to it. So we're going to have 35 and so on. So the next one will be the 35 plus this 20 to make it up to 400. So that's going to be 55, like that. 55 plus this 15 is going to be 70. And then this 70 plus 10 is going to be 80. And another way you can check you've done this correctly, or give yourself more reassurance you've done this correctly, is because it totals up to 80 and we are told it gives the wages of 80 people. Okay, so that's usually a good indication that we've done it right. So this question is worth 1 mark, and you get 1 mark for all the correct answers, as I have done here. Part B has told us, on the grid opposite, so we need to use a grid, draw a cumulative frequency graph for your completed table for 2 marks, okay? In our case, the grid is on the next page, so it's technically down, but that's fine. So, what we're going to do is, actually, before we start this, we need to remember one key thing about plotting cumulative frequency graphs, okay? And this is that for data, as we've got, so grouped data, so for grouped data, plot endpoint of group. And what this means is, because our data is given as a range, we're not given, strict data points, it's between 200 and 250, we're going to plot the data for 250, okay? So all we need to do is take this table and transfer it to our graph. So the first point is going to be 250 pounds and a cumulative frequency of 5. So let's come to our graph, okay? Nicely laid out for us. First point, 250, 5. We're going to put a little cross there, okay? You want to make a nice cross so the examiner can see it. The next one was, if we come back to our graph, was 300 for 15. Okay, so we can come back here. That's 300 for 15, like this. The next one was 350 for 35. So 350 all the way to 35 up here, like that. Then it was 400 for 55. So following this dark grey line up until here for 55. Then it was 450 for 70, so 450 for 70, which is up here, like that. And finally, it was 80 for 500. Okay, so follow the graph, 80 for 500, like this. Okay. Now, when drawing a cumulative frequency diagram, you have 2 options. You can either connect the dots with a curve, a smooth curve, or you can use straight lines. Okay, now I'm going to choose to go with straight lines just because I think it makes it cleaner for the examiner. Okay, so let's do just that. Let's draw a straight line from point to point. Okay, somewhat like this. Obviously in the exam you're going to use a ruler to draw these points on. There we go. This one didn't actually turn out as good, so let's just quickly fix that. Something like that. Next one is to here. Yeah, that's pretty good. And then something like that. Yeah, that's pretty nice actually. Okay, so we have our cumulative frequency graph like this, drawn with straight lines. And obviously, yes, you can use curved lines if you would like. So this question, or this part, sorry, is worth 2 marks. The first mark comes from 5 or 6 points correctly plotted from our cumulative frequency diagram, okay, which we have done. So we can just say our first mark for the correct points. And then our second mark comes from a fully correct graph. Okay, so I'm just going to also give ourselves a second mark, and I'm going to say fully correct. There we go. We are then told, Juan says 60% of the group of people have a weekly wage of £360 or less. Is Juan correct? And we must show how we got our answer. To begin with, I'm going to work out what 60% of the group is. Okay, so 60% of group equals 60% of 80 people, like this. This equals 60 over 100 times 80, and I'm just going to use the notation PPL for people. 60 times 80, so what we notice here, because we've got the 100 and 2 zeros here, we can actually cancel things out by writing it like this. So 60 times 80 over 100, we take this 0 and this 0 and 0 cancel, and we are left with 48 people. What we're going to do now is we're going to read from our graph where 48 people is and see what wage is corresponding to it. Okay? So let's go to our graph and let's look at where we can find 48 people. Okay? So this is going up in 1, 2, 3. So 45, 46, 47, 48. It is going to be this line across here. Okay, I've done that a bit too high. There we go. We're looking at around sort of this point here. Okay, which is 1.5 from the boundary. So 350, 355, 360, 365, 370, 375. This one would be 380. So we're looking at sort of between 375 and 380. If you were to do a curve, that would really map to 380. So we can take this as being 380. Okay, so somewhere around here, okay, is the value we're looking at. So we will just write this down here as being 380. So what we'll do is we'll come to our question and we'll say, from graph, 60% make 380 as their wage. We will say £380 is greater than £360, which is what Juan said, and therefore, no, he is wrong. Like that, okay? So what we've done here is we've used our data, well, we've worked out a value, we've used our graph, and we've come to a conclusion. So this part is worth 3 marks. The first mark comes from reading the value, from working out the number of people. The second mark comes from reading this value from the graph, and the third mark comes from a correct conclusion as such.